Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something really powerful, storytelling.
That's right.
If you're listening, you want to get the key info quickly, get it right, and that's exactly what we aim for.
Mm-hmm.
We've been looking at some really interesting points from a conversation about Rob Biesenbach's book, Unleash the Power of Storytelling.
Yeah, a great source.
And our mission, as always, is pretty clear. Pull out the core ideas and show how you can actually use them.
Absolutely. And it's, easy to think storytelling is just, kids' books or maybe movies.
Right.
But the conversation we drew from really emphasizes that, it's missing the point. Storytelling is fundamental. It's how we connect, persuade, even how we succeed in business. It's surprisingly effective.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The discussion we analyzed really drives home how a good story builds bridges and changes minds, much more than just, listing facts.
Exactly.
They used a great example, one many listeners might recognize. The job interview.
Oh, yes, the job interview. What's really striking there is the contrast they paint.
Uh-huh.
Think about just like reading off skills from your CV versus actually showing one through a short story.
Okay.
So instead of saying, I'm a great problem solver, you tell a quick story, a real challenge.
Yeah.
What you did, the result.
Right. Makes it real.
It totally changes things. You're not just a list anymore. You're memorable. And get this, they mentioned research showing stories can be up to 22 times more memorable than just facts.
Boy, 22 times. That's huge. Really highlights the impact.
It really does.
Now, I can almost hear some listeners thinking, okay, but isn't this just like fancy talk? Maybe stretching the truth a bit.
That's a fair question. And yeah, the conversation we looked at hits that directly.
Good.
It brings up this key point about integrity in storytelling, based on Biesenbach's view. The idea isn't to make stuff up. It's about finding the stories within your actual experiences.
Okay, authenticity.
Exactly. For a story to work, it needs to be authentic, real experiences, real values. It also needs to be relatable, connect with the audience somehow, and, crucially, relevant to whatever point you're making.
So being authentic means it's truthful, your perspective, no fibbing or exaggerating.
Precisely. It's taking your real life and shaping it into something compelling, with a purpose.
Right. So shaping reality, not inventing it. Then the conversation got into the building blocks of a good story, like a formula.
Yeah, kind of a flexible formula. The book and the discussion around it boils it down to three essentials. First, you need a character.
A character.
The person, or maybe even the thing, at the center. Someone the audience can, connect with or understand. Could be a customer, you, a colleague.
Makes sense. Hard to care if you don't know who it's about.
All
Okay,
right.
what's number 2?
Second key thing, conflict. The hurdle, the problem, the challenge the character bumps up against.
Ah, the drama.
Right, it creates tension, pulls people in, makes them wonder what happens next. And conflict can be, internal struggles, external competitors, relationship issues, lots of types.
Got it. No conflict, no story, basically. Keeps us hooked.
And the third piece. The third is resolution. How it all turns out. The conflict gets resolved, the problem solved, maybe a lesson learned. It gives that feeling of, closure.
Satisfying.
Yeah, leaves the audience with the main point, or just feeling like the story is complete, no loose ends.
Character conflict resolution. Okay. And the conversation used Hollywood movies as an example, right?
Spot on. Think about pretty much any movie you liked. There's a main character, the protagonist.
Uh-huh.
They face some big obstacle, maybe a villain that's the conflict.
Right.
And then, climax, resolution. Maybe they win, maybe it's more complicated, but it ends. Those same basic parts work, whether you're making a blockbuster or, say, pitching an idea.
And it's not just for epic tales, correct? The discussion also talked about applying this in everyday business. They mentioned Apple.
Yeah, the Apple example is really telling, especially under Steve Jobs. They didn't just sell gadgets, they sold a narrative.
How so?
Well, their marketing wasn't just, here are the specs. It was a story about empowering people, changing how we use tech.
The think different vibe.
Exactly. Not just buy this computer, but unleash your creativity. The user was often the character, the conflict was old, clunky tech, and the resolution was Apple's sleek, easy solution. It built this huge emotional connection.
Way beyond just features. That makes total sense. And this works for individuals, too, not just giant companies, like asking for a raise.
Absolutely. The conversation linked it right back to personal goals. Think about asking for that raise.
Okay.
You could just say, I deserve more money. Or you can tell a story. Remember that project last quarter? Here was the challenge we faced, conflict. Here's what I specifically did character action, and here's how it boosted revenue resolution.
Ah, painting a picture of your value.
Exactly. You're the character facing a conflict, delivering a positive resolution for the company. Much more persuasive than just stating you're worth it.
Shows, doesn't just tell. Okay, but what about the skeptics? The people who just want the data, the hard facts. Does storytelling work on them?
That's a great point, and the discussion brought up some fascinating brain science on this.
Oh, whoa, neuroscience.
Sort of. Research shows stories light up more parts of the brain than just facts do. Not just the language bits, but emotional centers, sensory areas too.
Interesting.
This wider brain activation means we actually retain the information better. It's like the story creates more hooks for the memory. So for listeners who value remembering details, this is why stories stick.
Which connects to that funny point they made. Something about remembering nursery rhymes better than algebra.
Slight chuckle.
Yeah.
Yeah, the three little pigs versus quadratic equations.
Right.
Most of us can still picture the pigs, the wolf, the houses years later. But ask about some random algebra formula. Much harder.
Definitely true for me.
It just perfectly shows how memorable narratives are. Makes the info stick.
Yeah, absolutely. So wrapping up that part, the conversation really stressed that storytelling isn't just fluff.
Not at all. That was a key takeaway. It's not a soft skill you can ignore. It's a genuinely powerful tool. Essential for connection, persuasion, just getting things done effectively.
Okay, so if we boil down everything we've pulled from that source discussion, what's the main message for our listeners?
I'd say the core message is this. Storytelling is a seriously effective way to connect with people, to persuade them, and ultimately to achieve more success professionally and personally.
And the way to do it.
Focus on those three elements, character, conflict, resolution, but always within a story that feels authentic, that your audience can relate to, and that's actually relevant to what you're trying to achieve.
That's really practical. It definitely changes how you might approach, well, a lot of conversations.
For sure.
So for everyone listening, maybe a final thought to chew on. Think about a situation you're in right now, a goal, a challenge, an idea you need to communicate. How could using character, conflict, and resolution storytelling make your approach more impactful? Or, flip it around, what stories have really stuck with you? Why did they work? Think about that might unlock how you can use stories yourself.
Great point to ponder.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.